You are listening to The Art of Sales. Everyone sells every day, and this is your source for conversational, real-world sales and prospecting methods that you are comfortable using and that get results. You'll help people buy instead of pushing them into being sold. Here's your host, Art Subcheck.
There's no doubt that it's harder than ever to get our messages noticed in today's crazy busy environment. And of course, we focus here primarily on our messaging that we use on the phone and in person to create interest and move the sales process forward. But a major challenge is actually getting through to our buyers. And our guest today specializes in an entire methodology that is designed to get attention, create interest, and get into meetings with our buyers. Stu Heinecke is an author, Wall Street Journal cartoonist, and Hall of Fame nominated marketer. When his great book, How to Get a Meeting with Anyone, debuted in 2016, it ignited an international sales and marketing movement. In the book, he coined the term contact marketing, which we're going to be talking about. It's a powerful form of outreach that uses clever contact campaigns to create the sort of connections that can change the scale of careers and businesses and lives. Now, since then, tens of thousands of sales reps and business owners, job seekers, entrepreneurs, even CEOs themselves have used contact marketing to generate stunning numbers of high-level connections and meetings and surges in revenue and investment. Stu is based on a beautiful island in the Pacific Northwest where he provides agency services, consulting, mastermind coaching, training, and weekend strategy sessions to help sales teams break through to their top accounts faster and more effectively. Stu, welcome.
Man, that sounds great. I'm wondering who's going to come on.
Well, you know, it's not bragging if you've done it. So you have quite a wide and varied career. And before we get into discussing how to get meetings, a lot of people are probably fascinated with what I mentioned right at the beginning, and that is a Wall Street Journal cartoonist. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, I've been cartooning my whole career. I was going to say my whole career, really beyond that. I mean, I was a kid. I was always drawing, and in fact, man, I don't know if I should tell this story or not, but you know, I got involved with cartoons when my brothers and I were sneaking Playboys out of our father's dresser drawers. So, I mean, one of the things I really paid attention to was the cartoons. They were amazing, and I was wondering who did this. How do they do this? And so it stuck with me, and eventually, I became a member of the Cartoonists Guild. It's no longer around, but the Cartoonists Guild had a major impact in my life because of one article that they sent, which talked about how cartoons are almost always the best read and remembered parts of any magazine or newspaper they're in, according to readership surveys. And that's part of what rocketed me into the direction of both cartooning as a cartoonist, but then also integrating it into marketing. So with the Wall Street Journal, it's a pretty simple thing. You draw a lot. Well, I mean, you create a lot of cartoons. You send them into the syndicate. It's and then the syndicate then chooses the cartoons and figures out when they want to run what cartoon, and it becomes part of the pepper and salt feature in the Wall Street Journal.
So I have to tell the audience how we first got connected, and it was through a cartoon. You, and I can't remember what it was. I think you wanted to interview me for, I don't know, one of your first books, or not sure what it was, but I got this cartoon in the mail that was personalized. So tell people about that.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's great because it actually leads straight into contact marketing itself. Because, you know, when I first started my career, as I mentioned, there was this duality of marketing. And that's what I studied in college at USC, and then cartooning. And I wanted to mix the two. Knowing that they were the best read and remembered parts of magazines and newspapers, I wanted to combine the two, and I wanted to combine them in. When I got out of college, direct mail was a big force, and personalization was becoming a big force. And so I wanted to combine all of that together and started personalizing the captions of the cartoon, or writing the gags, first of all, so that there could be first and last name data insertion points, but then using that to create these personalized little bits of magic on the face of an envelope. My first two assignments were for Rolling Stone and Bon Appetit. I mean, I wanted to create direct mail campaigns for publishers, for magazine publishers. So those first two assignments, they beat the control. So you create a test campaign, and then it goes up against the control. And for anyone who doesn't know what that means, in statistics, you always test against a control group, a constant. And in direct marketing, you test against essentially the same thing, but that control is the most effective thing they've ever, for example, put in the mail. So they're testing your campaign, the thing that you create, against their most effective thing they've ever used. So if you tie a control, you just tied the record for a response. But these first two, with these personalized cartoons, beat the controls. So they set records immediately. And I thought, okay, here's my chance to bring this to the rest of the publishing world. And which meant I needed to reach out to about 24 VPs and directors of circulation at these big Manhattan-based media companies. I mean, like Time Inc. And what I needed to do, though, was reach 24 VPs or directors of circulation. And the way that I did that is I produced this little campaign. I didn't know what to call it, so I called it a contact campaign. It was an 8x10 print of a cartoon. Each one was personalized, of course, to each recipient. And it went with a note saying, hey, this is the device I just used to beat the controls for Rolling Stone and Bon Appetit, and I think we should put this to the test for your titles as well. And that campaign generated 100% response rate. I got through to all of them. All of them became clients, so that's 100% conversion. It all stemmed from a campaign that cost me less than $100, and it launched my business, and it was worth millions of dollars to me. And that was my first experience with contact marketing.
So in your first book, How to Get a Meeting with Anyone, you pioneered that term, contact marketing. So explain in a little bit more detail exactly what that is.
It's a fusion of marketing and selling that uses micro-focused campaigns to connect with high value prospects and accounts. So you're using a campaign, it could be a campaign of one, but you're using these small campaigns to reach out to the people who have the greatest ability to change the scale of your career, your business, and ultimately your life. That's really the essence of contact marketing.
In execution, contact marketing essentially and very simply is sending something to someone that is personalized so it gets their attention and then paves the way either for your outreach, phone call, email, whatever, or to get them to respond, correct?
Personalization doesn't have to be an element of it, but it often is. I mean, you often see personalization involved, and you also see sometimes handwritten notes. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I would say ultimately I say that's correct, and personalization is often a feature of that, but it's not always there.
So I would encourage everybody to get that book. And you have just released a brand new book, which is a follow-up, which is called Get the Meeting. So tell us about that and how it's different from the first book.
So How to Get a Meeting with Anyone, as you said, came out in 2016. I interviewed a lot of the top sales leaders, which, as you mentioned, that's how you and I came in contact, because I interviewed you as well. And what I was asking everyone was, when you absolutely have to break through to someone of great importance, someone who's going to be nearly impossible to reach, how are you reaching them? And a lot of great, amazing ways or methods for reaching out and breaking through to people of great importance came out of that. And in fact, I arranged those into 20 categories of contact marketing campaign types in How to Get a Meeting with Anyone. Well, as soon as that book came out, I started hearing from people some people were saying, I'm using your book, it's changing my results, which is wonderful. If you're writing a book, you hope that's what it'll do out in the world. But others were saying things like, yeah, I wish we had done an interview together too, because I have a method for breaking through. And some of these were just amazing. And so I realized very quickly this was not an exhaustive list that I'd put together. There were a lot more stories and methods that I needed to share with everyone. The other thing that I was hearing a lot about was, hey, I loved your book, really enjoyed it, but I wish I could have seen what these campaigns looked like. And so ultimately, the publisher and I sat down and we said, we need to do a follow-up. This should be a group of case studies, maybe around 70, and it ended up being about 65 or so case studies and tactical studies. Some of these things haven't even been used yet, but a set of these case studies that people could read and glean lessons from and say, okay, good, we're going to do that, but we're going to use it this way. We're going to do this instead. And that's what all of these are actually meant to do, is just inspire people to say, okay, here's how we're going to use that, because you don't have to follow what everyone else. I mean, when you read about Dan Waldschmidt's swords, you can infer that you can send a visual metaphor to someone and it'll be powerful, but you don't have to send sword. That's how the book started out. And then the process just took over. I mean, it's a process of discovery that's just incredible. The more you hear these stories, the more stories are added in and added on. There's just this amazing groundswell to break through, and extraordinary things to break through to these people who can change everything at the scale of everything in their lives. As I went through all these stories, one of the things I did, I've always been fascinated with business cards, but only a few business cards. And what the difference is, because some people have cards that just knock your socks off. Everyone else has cards that try to do that and don't. So what's the difference? And then how do we pull that into the contact marketing model? And in fact, the whole contact marketing model changed as a result of writing the book. So by the time I got to the end of writing all these stories out and these methods out, I realized, man, there's this whole new manifesto for contact marketing. It has already been generating metrics that I've never heard of from other forms of marketing. One of my Fortune 250 clients went from a 0% contact rate to a 70% contact rate and 50% meeting rate with their top accounts, their global accounts. Once they switched over from cold calling to using actually one of my own contact marketing systems that uses cartoons, those kinds of results
what
are
did they
amazing.
do?
Well, they're using that's using my big board program or system. So it's based around this big 18 by 24 inch, quarter inch thick foam core board that has a cartoon on one side about the recipient. The cartoon's done by either a New Yorker or Wall Street Journal cartoonist. Of course, the cartoon is about the recipient. And then you flip it over, and that's where all the branding is and the messaging. And there's a message from the sender to the recipient explaining who they are, why they should meet, and what the next steps are. And maybe sometimes what the holdback device is. What you'll get when we meet, perhaps. That's then packaged in this really cool corrugated cardboard packaging with cartoon art all over it. When it shows up, it looks like something that came out of a cartoon art gallery, but it's showing up by FedEx. There's a preamble to all this. The rep will call the person's assistant to say, hi, my name is so-and-so. I'm sending a print of a cartoon by one of the Wall Street Journal cartoonists, and it's about your boss. And as soon as they get just those words out, the assistant is usually saying, wait, what? Really? So it continues. Yeah, so I want to coordinate with you. I want it to be a surprise to your boss, but not to you. So would you mind if I send you an email with the details? No, not at all. Here's my name. Here's how you spell it. Here's my email address. So you're already correct. You're already connecting with the executive assistant, which is so critical. There's such a critical piece of this process. You send them an email, or an email goes out saying, hi, thanks for your help on the phone. To confirm, here's what I'm sending. They'll often send out a greeting card that goes out, but it looks like a professional card. It's got a cartoon about the assistant and a little note, thank you so much for your help. Then another email you might send out would be, here's the FedEx tracking information. So by the time the big board even shows up, you've had 4 touches with the executive assistant, and it's critical because in my first book, I called them VPs of access and talent scouts. They really are talent scouts. They're looking for extraordinary stuff to bring to their bosses.
And that's the premise that we always teach here. Too many people try to get through or past or over or around assistants. They call them gatekeepers and screeners, but I like to call them assistants. You've just demonstrated here how important they are in that whole process. And Stu, when I went through the book, and I always get review copies before I have a guest on, and many times just skim it. So I'm prepared and able to talk about the book. Yours, I couldn't put down. I went through the entire thing, and I'm sitting there going after case study after case study, just fascinated. One that really stuck out to me was the sales development rep, Lee Hamilton. Lee had this idea, and his boss was skeptical about the idea. So if you recall that, could you explain what Lee did?
Yeah, that was great. So that's one of those stories that came up after the first book came out. He said, okay, I'm going to put together a cartoon illustration, have it printed on stretch canvas, and I'm going to send it out to these 12 accounts that nobody'd been able to penetrate. He was preparing this. That's kind of a big deal. I mean, it's a big item. It's in card, and it's in this big box. It's kind of hard to miss. As he was putting this together, his CEO happened to walk by, and he said, what are you doing? And Lee said, well, I read this book, and I'm going to try this. I'm going to send out, but they were personalized to each recipient, just little details about their company. Their company logo might be on the side of a truck in the scene. And Lee said, want to bet? The CEO is wonderful. I ended up interviewing him. What a good sport Frank was. So he said, yeah, sure, I'll do it. I'll bet with you. So lo and behold, Lee sent them out and all 12 of them responded. He got 100% response rate. And needless to say, he won the bet. But the CEO kind of won the bet too, didn't he?
People might be listening to this, and if they're not familiar with you or your work or contact marketing, they might look at this and say, well, it's expensive to do that and it takes time. What do you say to that?
Well, Aaron Ross, the author of Predictable Revenue, Aaron says in one of his books that you need seeds, nets, and spears for an effective strategy, go-to-market strategy. And so this is the spear. If you're able to put together a list of people, and in my first book, I call it your top 100 list. If you're able to put together your top 100 list, these would be the people that if you could get them as they'd be dream clients. So if you could get them as clients, they would change. I keep talking about changing your scale, but you can actually explode the scale of your business quickly when you make the right connections and then from there, the right sales. If you can identify these people, then you should be doing something about getting in contact with them and creating a relationship with them and ultimately converting them to clients. And you don't do that by running a lead generation program and hope that these particular people pop into your system or into your funnel. You go out and you get them. I mean, it's really nothing revolutionary about this at all. It's what sales always has been. So it's outbound.
Well, basically, it gets down to math, because if I can spend, let's say, $100 to bring in an account, that's going to mean $1,000 to me in profit. Or how about the lifetime value of that customer? Why wouldn't I spend as many $100 as I could all day long, right?
Yeah.
Continue to scale it. So that's the thing that people need to look at. And again, you may not do it for everybody, but everybody has the list of those whales or those dream accounts that they could apply contact marketing to. I know in my case, and I've been doing this for a long time, not everybody has books that they've written, but I send out signed copies of my book, do the things that you talk about. It doesn't even need to be your own book. And I've suggested this to sales reps. Many of my clients do this now. They send copies of other people's books. I encourage everybody out there listening to buy like a bunch of copies of my books. They make great Christmas presents, so you can give those away. Anyway, so tell us about the guy who connected with you on LinkedIn, and then he sent you a block of wood in the mail.
A lot of people want to share their stories with me, and I love that because I then like to turn around and share their stories with them to the rest to my audience. Certainly, one fellow wanted to get my attention. I don't really know about these things until they show up. I mean, they'd show up, and one day this block of wood showed up in the mailbox, and it had my name written out in probably Sharpie. And there was postage on it and a return address label on it.
Block of wood.
It did say on the back, I have ideas stronger than this. And it had his phone number. But, just the audacity of sending a block of wood. Generally, we think, well, we've got to really impress the person if we're going to reach out to them. And we got one chance for a first impression. I thought that was just so audacious. Actually, yesterday, I created a new annual award for the most audacious, and there's going to be a lot of competition for this, but the most audacious method for breaking through to an important account or prospect. He got the first award yesterday.
Well, if you publicize this, Stu, I would be probably a little bit afraid every time I'd go to my mailbox or anytime FedEx or UPS shows up. Who knows what's going to be waiting for you there? So you talked about earlier about business cards, and so you coined the term contact marketing in the first book, and now you came up with another brilliant one in this book, and you call it pocket campaigns. So explain what that is.
I think that's my favorite part of the book, actually. We've all gotten a lot of business cards. And on LinkedIn, I posed an impromptu survey. I just asked people to tell me if they're using business cards or not. If they're not using business cards, what are they doing instead? And if they are, what are they using for business cards? What I found was that about half of the people who responded said, I don't even use business cards anymore. I don't even bother. Those people, what they were doing was they'd maybe trade, if they met someone at a networking event, then maybe they'd trade phones and type their details into each other's address books, or maybe they'd connect on LinkedIn right there. But we know that, if you connect on LinkedIn, it's kind of about as significant an act as waving to someone who's going on the other direction on the freeway. I mean, it's there and it's done, it's over, and you forget about it. And what a lost opportunity in all of that, because if someone typed their details into my address book, and then later I'm saying, now, what was their name again? They're lost. They're gone. I won't know who they were. And then similarly, business cards, geez, there's this strategy that's a failed strategy at this point, certainly a worn out strategy, which is let's make our business cards make us look impressive. And so there's sort of an arms race. You can have laser engraved cards made on metal and carbon fiber. You can on paper. There are all kinds of paper stocks and embossing and foil stamping and so on. And none of it works. All those cards, they just go into a box somewhere or they get thrown away. I knew though that I've gotten business cards from time to time that I've just said, "Whoa, oh my God, I didn't realize that a business card could be like that. Wow." So I started on my journey. I just thought I've got to come up with a better way of using those, just in-person impromptu contacts to pull people into your contact marketing campaign contact marketing program. So I started with, well, what is it about those cards that makes them so compelling? And what I realized real quickly is that, well, they're not trying to impress you, and they're not, there's no gold foil stamping or any of that stuff. What's actually going, or even logos, what's going on is they're handing out involvement devices. So these could be fold over cards that have a paper sculpture that pops out. It could be all kinds of different things. But the thing that they had in common is that these were invitations to play with the card or use the card in some way. And so that's what we started with. And if you wouldn't mind, I know this is kind of a long answer, but can I share a quick story? Because I think this will
Sure.
illustrate. So one of the guys that I found on the internet and then interviewed was printed on a little sheet of sheet rubber, sort of tan gum rubber, and it was stretched on a jig, and then they printed it and allowed the ink to cure and dry. Then they take it off the jig. Of course, the card returns to its original shape, and now all the contact details are squeezed together, kind of like a deflated balloon. So he was telling me that he said that when he'd go out to the pub, I guess he goes out to the pub a lot, and got into a conversation with someone, got sort of like, "What do you do? And what do you do?" At some point, they'd trade cards, and he'd pull out his floppy little card and hand it to the person. They'd laugh. They'd grab it with both hands and stretch it, because how else can you read it? And it reveals it's Paul Nielsen's card. He's a fitness trainer. And guess what? He already has you exercising. It's pretty cool. And they loved it so much. They'd say, "Can I keep this?" "Yeah, it's my business card." So they'd take it into the office. They'd take it everywhere. They'd keep it in their pockets just to show it off. And Paul said that every time he handed one of those out, he would get 3 or 4 new clients. I was stunned by that, because I've got pretty cool business cards. They have cartoons on them, and they reveal I'm a Wall Street Journal cartoonist, for example. But I've never handed out cards and have clients come back as a result, and multiple clients because someone showed the card around. That's just never happened. So all of these things formed the nucleus for pocket campaigns, which are basically this. Let's say you chose the format, because there's lots of different formats, but let's say you chose the format of a card that is the size of a credit card, but it has cutouts, so it's a multi-tool. It can be a wrench and bottle opener and all that stuff. So you could put your contact details on it. Let's say if it's a pocket campaign, then what we want to happen is we want to draw them to a specific landing page where we can set a tracking pixel, and then from there we run retargeting ads. So I should explain that real quickly. That if the multi-tool is the engagement device, the initial piece that you pull out of your pocket to initiate the pocket campaign, then what we want on the campaign piece is, of course, your contact details, but you don't have to gussy it up even with logos. You can put your logo on it, but you don't have to gussy it up with anything. You just put your contact details on it. Maybe on the flip side, you put a URL where you can go to view a video so you can see how to use the tool. So it's not a promotional offer, but it is a jump offer. And it pulls you to that page where you watch the video to see how to use the tool. But by the way, because you stopped at that page, now we've set a tracking pixel and we pull you into the persistence, the digital persistence track of the contact marketing program that's part of the new model of contact marketing, is that there's a digital persistence element. So now, instead of just handing out a card that's inert and may get thrown into a box or thrown away, you hand out a campaign device that pulls people to a jump page, which sets a pixel and puts them into an ongoing persistence campaign, so that they're seeing ads from you just because you handed out the card. That's that. And so you actually get ROI and sales and a response rate.
Wow, that's brilliant. And when I read that section, just like every section, and Stu breaks down all these different ways that we can use contact marketing, video and physical things and social media. And with every section, I was experiencing, I think, what you intended the book to do, and that is getting people thinking about, how can I do this? How can I do this as is, or how can I adapt adapt it. And I guarantee when you get this book, you're going to experience the same thing, because ultimately our goal here as salespeople, of course, if we're prospecting, is to create interest, create attention, and get in so that we can have a conversation. Stu, this is awesome. We could probably talk all day long, but the best thing to do for folks would be just go out and get the first book, which is How to Get a Meeting with Anyone. And then the follow-up book, which is just out right now, is Get the Meeting. Stu, do you have some contact information here that you'd like to share with our listeners?
I guess two things. One would be, if you want to connect, mention that you heard me on Art's show, and we'll have something to talk about. But connect with me on LinkedIn. So it's just my name, Stu Heinecke, STU, and then HEINECKE. You can find the books anywhere, How to Get a Meeting with Anyone, and Get the Meeting in Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, etc. You can also get I guess I should offer this too, if you want to visit my author page, again, StuHeinecke.com. So those are, that's probably a good way to wrap
Great.
up.
And we'll have all these links on the show site, or the show page as well. All right, Stu, this has been awesome. And one more thing, we have a regular feature here on the show. Everybody, you know what time it is.
Your attitude will be in every way, you'll never feel what they say. It's the art of the sales quote of the day.
That's right. It's time for the quote of the day. Stu, I'd imagine you've been inspired by a lot of people in your life. So what's one of your favorite quotes, and why is it important to you?
Well, there are two that come to mind real quickly. One is by Winston Churchill, and he said, "If you're going through hell, keep going." I think that's good advice. It's
Don't want to
enough.
stop there.
Yeah, don't stop. And the other is actually one of my own, I guess. But I just noticed that really the things obviously change is a constant, and people seem to resist it. And so that one of my own is, the one thing that never changes is that things always change, and they do. And I think if you remember that, you're okay with it. You'll know that you just can't stop it.
Stu, thank you again for sharing the great stories about both your books and contact marketing with us. And again, everybody, the new book is Get the Meeting, and the first book is
How to Get a Meeting with Anyone.
Thank you so much, Stu. And thank you all so much for investing your valuable sales time with us today. Until next time, go out and make it your best sales day ever. I'm Art Subcheck.